The descent begins. What Jung called his darkest hour. In 1913, Carl Jung stood on the edge of an inner world no map could chart. To the world, he was a respected psychiatrist, a rising figure in the psychoanalytic movement. But inside, something ancient was stirring. That year, Jung experienced what many mistook for a psychological breakdown. But it was not madness. It was a descent, a sacred unraveling, a summons from the depths. The rupture began after his break with Freud, a mentor, a friend, a father figure. Freud represented the world of reason, science, and linear thought. But Jung heard something else beneath the rational mind, a whisper, a shadow, a dream that would not die. He began seeing visions, floods swallowing Europe, blood, serpents, gods, towers collapsing, not hallucinations, but what he called active imagination. The soul dramatizing its truth in the language of myth. He feared he was going insane. And yet he chose to listen. He did not run, he did not numb. He turned inward and walked straight into the unknown. Jung's descent wasn't a clinical episode, it was initiation. He left behind the known world of credentials, theories, and applause to face the wilderness within. He called this time his Nachtmeerfahrt, the night sea journey. It's a mythic passage that echoes through ancient stories. Inanna's descent into the underworld, Odysseus in the belly of the sea, Christ in the tomb. The hero must go down before they rise. Jung wrote in The Red Book not to publish, but to survive. It was his scripture, his journal of visions, his map of the underworld. He met archetypes, faced his shadow, spoke with inner guides. He realized the psyche is not a machine, but a cosmos. He saw the unconscious not as illness, but as sacred. This was his darkest hour, but also the most luminous. Because in the dark, he found light no theory could give him. And what he discovered changed the course of psychology forever. He returned from his descent not broken, but whole. He brought back a new language, shadow, individuation, anima, archetype, synchronicity. He taught that the journey inward is not dysfunction, but destiny, and that true healing begins when we're brave enough to lose our way. His descent was not just personal, it is universal, because sooner or later life will call each of us into the dark, not to punish us, but to return us to ourselves. When everything falls apart, when the world no longer makes sense, remember Jung. He walked through the fire, and he left us a light, not to follow, but to find our own. What is the Red Book? And why was it hidden for 50 years? For half a century it lay locked away. A crimson tome bound in silence, resting like a heart beneath floorboards, beating with secrets too sacred for the world to hear. The Red Book, not a textbook, not a theory, but a soul's autobiography. This was Jung's most private work, written not for academia, but for survival. Between 1913 and 1930, Jung poured himself into it. Page after page, image after image, not as a scientist, but as a seeker. It was painted, penned, and illuminated like an ancient scripture. A living gospel of the inner world. A record of visions, voices, gods, demons, and the deep dialogues between Jung and his soul. He called it Liber Novus, the new book. And yet, he hid it. He kept it locked in a Swiss vault. He feared the world would not understand, not just because of its mystical tone, but because the Red Book wasn't about proving something. It was about surrender. This was not the Jung of theories and frameworks. This was the Jung who knelt before the fire inside. In the Red Book, he wrote not as an authority, but as a man undone. He spoke to Philemon, his inner sage. He battled the Red One, his shadow. He descended into realms of madness and myth, only to rise with meaning. This wasn't psychology as we knew it. This was soulcraft, so why was it hidden for 50 years? Because the world wasn't ready. Because truth, when too raw, threatens the structures built to contain it. Because even Jung, courageous as he was, knew that the collective psyche prefers comfort over confrontation. And perhaps he wasn't ready either. He once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But the Red Book is nothing if not an invitation. To face your soul, it's a mirror, a myth, a map of descent and return. And now, more than ever, its relevance has exploded. Why? Because we are a generation adrift. We scroll instead of dream. We analyze instead of feel. We build personas instead of relationships. And deep beneath all our performance, we're hungry for meaning. The Red Book doesn't offer easy answers. It offers a path, not upward, but inward. Jung said the modern person must find their own myth, or fall into the myths of others. The Red Book was his myth, etched in blood, ink, and archetype. To read it is to remember, not knowing where it would lead. And what emerged was a new map of the psyche, not flat and clinical, but alive, mysterious, and spiritual. He taught that the voice within is not a symptom, but a summons, an invitation to relate to our inner world with the same respect we give the outer, to engage in inner conversation with as much patience and vulnerability as we offer lovers, mentors, and friends. Your soul is speaking too, maybe not with words, maybe with images in dreams, or an ache you can't name, or a symbol that keeps appearing. Active imagination is not performance, it's presence. It's sitting with the image, the emotion, the shadow, and asking, what do you want to show me? Not to fix, not to judge, just to witness. Jung's method was not madness, it was a return to meaning, and in his quiet dialogues with the soul, he found what the world had forgotten. The truth we seek is not out there, it has always been within. Synchronicity and symbolism, when life speaks in signs. In the stillness between thoughts, life whispers, not in logic, but in patterns. In the uncanny timing of a phone call, the dream that mirrors reality, the stranger who says exactly what your heart needed to hear. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence with no clear cause, yet too precise to be random. During the depth of his descent, Jung was guided not by maps, but by symbols. He began to notice. The external world was mirroring his inner state. A dream image would reappear in real life. A book would fall open to the exact passage his soul was struggling to understand. He realized the psyche was not isolated. It was woven into the fabric of the cosmos. Not everything can be explained, but everything can be listened to. To Jung, these signs weren't superstition. They were the language of the unconscious. The soul does not speak in paragraphs. It speaks in patterns, metaphors, and moments. Synchronicities are not answers. They are invitations. To pause, to reflect, to ask, what is life trying to show me? In our modern world, we miss them. We rush past signs, numb to symbols, disconnected from the sacred rhythm beneath ordinary time. But when you start paying attention, you'll notice. That person, that word, that song did not just appear. It arrived, on cue, with meaning, like a messenger from the unseen. Jung saw this as evidence that we live in a psycho-spiritual field where the inner and outer mirror one another. He wrote, the psyche and the world are not separate, they speak to one another. So when you feel empty, ask not just what's wrong, ask, what am I not hearing? The sign you're seeking may not be loud, it may come as a coincidence. A recurring number, a feather, a name, a memory, a dream you keep forgetting, yet cannot shake. This is the soul's Morse code, a language not of noise, but meaning. Synchronicity reminds us, you are not lost. You are being spoken to, not from above, but from within. Shadow encounters, meeting the self. You've rejected. There is a part of you you do not post, do not name, do not show. The part that gets angry, jealous, terrified. The part that failed, that hurt someone, that wanted more than it should. Carl Jung called this part the shadow, not because it is evil, but because it is unseen, banished from your conscious identity because somewhere along the line you were told that's not who you're allowed to be. So you buried it, under performance, under politeness, under perfecta. But the shadow does not disappear, it waits. And then, in moments of stress, heartbreak, or deep intimacy, it emerges. Not to punish, but to be met. During his darkest nights, Jung encountered his own shadow. Not as a villain, but as a lost twin. He realized, until you face the part of you you've rejected, you cannot become whole. The shadow is your denied power, your buried creativity, your rage, yes, but also your truth. To embrace it is terrifying. It requires humility. It requires stepping into emotional fire. But if you do not face it, you will project it onto your partner, your friends, your enemies, your children. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the heart of transformation. Not transcendence, but integration. Can you hold your inner monster with tenderness? Can you listen to the part of you that sabotages and ask, what are you protecting me from? The shadow is not bad. It's just wounded, and it's tired of being locked in the basement of your psyche. When you finally turn to it, not to fix it, but to understand it, a strange thing happens. It softens. It tells you its name. It stops running your life from behind the curtain. Wholeness does not mean being perfect. It means being complete. You are light. You are dark. You are everything in between. Your healing begins the moment you stop pretending otherwise. You're not going crazy. You're going inward. There's a silence that feels like madness, a breaking point where the world becomes too loud and your own thoughts no longer feel like home. You forget who you are. You cry without reason. You question everything. Your job, your relationships, your faith, your very identity. And the people around you might whisper words like burnout, breakdown, mental health crisis. But what if it's none of those? What if this unraveling isn't the end, but the beginning? Carl Jung called it individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you truly are beneath the masks, beneath the ego, beneath the life you were told to live. He knew this path was terrifying, because before you become whole, you must first become lost. The ego, your constructed self, starts to dissolve, and it feels like death, because in a way it is. Not the death of your life, but the death of your illusion. You are not going crazy, you are waking up, you are peeling away the layers that were never truly yours. The persona you've worn, the achiever, the pleaser, the strong one, no longer fits. It begins to crack, and behind it, something ancient stirs. The soul. Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The psyche resists change until it can resist no more. Then, in dreams, in anxiety, in sudden moments of emptiness, the unconscious pushes through. You feel like something is calling you, but you can't name it. That is the soul. And it doesn't speak in words, it speaks in symbols. In fatigue that makes no medical sense. In grief with no clear cause. In a longing you can't explain. You're not broken. You're breaking open. This is the inner spiral, the descent Jung himself endured after his split with Freud. A period of darkness so profound he feared for his sanity. But instead of resisting, he listened. He let the psyche lead. He followed the images, feelings, the symbols, and slowly, painfully, he found something deeper, his true self. Individuation is not a one-time awakening. It's a lifelong journey, a returning to the wholeness you've always carried inside, but forgot how to access. It means integrating the parts of you you've rejected, ignored, or denied. It means becoming real, raw, fully alive. So if you're afraid, if you feel like you're losing your grip, know this. You're not going crazy. You're going inward. You're crossing the threshold that few dare to cross. And on the other side of that chaos is clarity. Not the old kind that came from control, but a new kind that comes from surrender. You are not falling apart. You are falling inward, into truth, into wholeness, into the self you were always meant to become. The mythic self, why Jung believed you are your own hero. You are not lost. You are in the middle of your story, not a random story, not one written by fate or accident, but a myth, a sacred unfolding of your soul's deeper purpose. Carl Jung believed that each of us carries within us a personal myth, an invisible script etched into the unconscious, guiding our suffering, our longing, and our rebirth. But most of us forget this. We wake up into a world of routines, rules, and roles. We trade the mystery of our inner world for the safety of the outer one. And in that trade, we lose the plot. We mistake the pain for punishment. We mistake the confusion for failure. We think something is wrong with me. But Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. This chapter of your life, the despair, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, is not a dead end. It is Act 2 of your myth, the part where the hero stumbles into darkness, unsure if they will ever return. You are that hero, you always have been, and the trials you face, the heartbreaks, the losses, the shame, are not meaningless obstacles, they are initiations. In every great myth, there comes a moment when the hero must descend. Into the forest, into the underworld, into the self. That descent is not failure, it is the beginning of transformation. You see, the myth lives in symbols, in dreams that haunt you, in books that speak directly to your soul, in the feeling that you were born for something more, but you can't quite name it yet. That's not delusion. That's memory, your deeper self remembering its story. The world will not remind you, it will tell you to chase comfort, to numb the ache, to follow the scripts handed down by others. But your soul knows better. Your soul knows that the wound is the place where the light enters, that your suffering is the raw material from which wisdom is forged. Jung believed that we are not here to be saved. We are here to become conscious, to awaken to our own story, and to live it fully, no matter how painful, no matter how lonely, no matter how long it takes. This is the path of the mythic self, not the false self that performs, pleases, or hides, but the deeper self, the one that dares to be whole. You are not just surviving, you are becoming. So the next time you feel lost, remember, you are in the middle of a myth, and the hero always walks through fire before they rise. The way out is in, embracing silence, solitude, and soul. There is a kind of silence that frightens the modern mind, not because it is empty, but because it is full. Carl Jung understood this silence. He withdrew not to escape life, but to listen more deeply to it. Because in a world addicted to noise, stillness becomes a rebellion, and solitude, a sacred return. We are taught that answers are out there. In the next article, the next podcast, the next voice loud enough to drown our own. But Jung said the true voice is within, whispering softly beneath the surface, not the ego's voice, but the soul's. And the soul doesn't shout. It waits, patiently, in silence, in dreams, in the space between distractions. Modern life teaches us to be visible, to be productive, connected, and entertained. But the soul does not thrive in visibility. It thrives in intimacy with the unseen. This is why solitude matters, not as loneliness, but as communion. Time spent not just alone, but with yourself. Most of us avoid this. We fear what we'll hear. We fear the ache that rises when the noise fades. We think the ache is something to escape. But Jung believed the ache is the invitation. The ache is where the soul begins to speak. In solitude, you meet the forgotten parts of yourself, the child you abandoned to survive, the artist you silenced to be accepted, the truth you buried to be loved, and as you sit with these fragments, they begin to return, not in chaos but in wholeness. Jung called this process active imagination, dialoguing with your inner world as if it were alive, because it is. Your journal is not just a notebook, it is a mirror, a ritual, a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. Each word is a thread pulling your soul back together, and in the quiet of those pages, you remember something the world wants you to forget. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are becoming. Silence is not absence. It is presence, unfiltered. Solitude is not exile. It is return to the self, to the sacred, to the source of your own knowing. Jung's deepest wisdom was never loud. It echoed through mountain walks, through silent afternoons with a journal, through the inner sanctuary of a man who dared to face himself. Now it's your turn. Sit quietly. Let the ache rise. Listen. Not for the answer, but for the voice you forgot was yours, because the way out was always in. Rebirth. Through the Red Book, How to Start Your Own Awakening. There comes a moment when silence becomes unbearable. Not because it hurts, but because it asks something of you. It asks you to remember who you are beneath the masks. And that is where your awakening begins. Carl Jung wrote the Red Book not as a guide for others, but as a sacred conversation with his own soul. It was chaotic, beautiful, terrifying, a descent into everything he had hidden, and yet it was also his rebirth. This is your invitation to begin your own red book, not for publication, but for transformation. You don't need a therapist or a guru. You need only curiosity and the courage to feel what you've spent years avoiding. Begin where Jung began, with dreams. Each night, your unconscious sends you symbols, stories from the soul, disguised as absurdities. But they are not nonsense, they are maps. So write them down, every image, every feeling, every question. Over time, a pattern will form, a personal myth waiting to be understood. Next, meet your shadow, not with judgment, but with compassion. Open your journal and ask, what am I pretending not to feel? What am I ashamed of that might still be part of me? Let the answers come, raw and imperfect. Shadow work isn't about fixing, it's about embracing what was once exiled. You'll feel resistance. That's normal. The ego will try to protect you with distraction, doubt, or logic. But the soul speaks in paradox, not certainty. Look for emotional patterns, the people who trigger you, the stories you keep repeating. These aren't coincidences, they are mirrors. Everything you run from, your anger, your loneliness, your fear, holds a message. Sit with it, write to it, ask it what it wants you to know. This is not passive reflection, this is active imagination. It is dialogue with your inner world, as Jung once did with Philemon, his inner guide. You're not broken for feeling lost. You're not weak for craving more. You're waking up. You are the dreamer and the dreamed, the question and the answer, the seeker and the self. There is no map but your own truth, no guru but your soul, no textbook for the rebirth that is uniquely yours. So begin. Write your red book. Light a candle. Ask a question. Feel what you've avoided. And know this: every moment you choose presence over numbness, truth over performance, wholeness over perfection, you are already returning. You are already being born, not as someone new, but as the person you were always meant to be. The sacred madness, why society fears, inner awakening. What if your confusion was sacred? What if your breakdown was not an end, but a threshold? Carl Jung called it the sacred madness. A moment when the soul begins to awaken, and the ego can no longer hold its grip. But society doesn't understand that, because modern culture fears what it cannot control, and nothing is more unruly than an awakening soul. When you begin to ask deeper questions, who am I really? Why am I here? Why does all this feel empty? People start to look at you differently. They call it a phase. They tell you to cheer up. They whisper behind your back, maybe they need help. But they don't realize you are meeting yourself for the first time. You are no longer content to live a life of silent performance, of polite numbness, of fitting into roles that never felt like home. You are stepping outside the lines. And so the world, in its discomfort, will call it madness. Not because it is dangerous, but because it is unfamiliar, uncontainable. Jung believed that many so-called psychoses are not diseases, but attempts of the soul to break through the concrete walls of conformity. He once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. So when you begin to slow down, to withdraw from noise, to cry for no reason, to feel like the ground beneath you is shifting, it's not that something is wrong. It's that something real is being born. But be warned, awakening does not make you popular. It may cost you approval. It may make your success look strange, your values alien. People who once felt familiar may now seem distant. Not because you hate them, but because you've outgrown the mask you wore beside them. You are not better than them. You are simply listening to a deeper voice, the one they've spent years silencing. This chapter of your life is raw, lonely at times, and terrifying. But it is also holy. You are not mentally ill for feeling disconnected from a sick culture. You are not broken for grieving the roles you no longer wish to play. You are not crazy for craving something real. You are remembering, and remembrance, in a forgetting world, is the most radical act of all. So let them call it madness. Let them whisper. You know what it really is. Sacred, necessary, true, the beginning of everything real. Integration, not escape, making wholeness. Your new way of life awakening is not a one-time epiphany. It's not a weekend retreat, a quote on your wall, or a fleeting spiritual high. It's not about escaping the world. It's about returning to it, whole. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Real transformation does not happen in the moments that feel magical. It happens in the days that feel ordinary. It happens when you choose presence over performance, stillness over stimulation, courage over comfort. Integration means inviting your shadow to sit at the table without shame. It means loving the parts of yourself you once denied, the fear, the anger, the loneliness, the ache. Not to indulge them, not to be ruled by them, but to see them, to hear their story, to learn from their pain. Because every disowned part of you holds a piece of your truth. Your awakening is not complete when you understand the soul. It is complete when you live in a way that honors it. That means setting boundaries not to punish others, but to protect your peace. It means saying no without guilt and yes without fear. It means creating, speaking, moving, and relating from your center. This is the quiet power of integration. No fireworks, no applause. Just a grounded, rooted, steady return to self. The world may not notice your transformation, but you will. You'll notice it in the way you breathe, deeper, slower. In the way you speak, more honest, less hurried. In the way you choose, aligned, not reactive. You no longer chase moments of intensity to feel alive, because you are learning how to be alive in the mundane. That is the gift of wholeness. And yes, you will forget. You will fall back into old patterns. You will be triggered, lost, exhausted. But now you have something you didn't have before, awareness. And awareness, Jung taught, is the beginning of freedom. You are not here to escape your humanity. You are here to inhabit it fully. So let the journey continue, not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in the sacred rhythm of your daily life. Making tea in silence, tending to your body with care, speaking kindly to your inner child, honoring your shadow instead of fearing it. Choosing connection over chaos. This is integration. This is what real transformation looks like. Embodied, lived, sustainable.